It was my daughter's 45th birthday. I arrived early with a $200 0-cent cake, expecting a smile. Instead, she looked at me with pure annoyance and later told me the only gift she wanted was for me to die. The banner over the mantel said 45 in gold, but the house felt colder than a waiting room. Placed on sunshine spilled across a spotless kitchen island where a catered spread lay under silver lids I wasn't invited to lift. Balloons knocked lightly against the ceiling vent. I balanced the cake box in both hands and felt the weight in my wrists, the same wrists still wearing my silver bracelet, my husband's last gift before he passed. I had chosen chocolate with strawberries, the kind Melissa loved as a child, because I'd learned memory as a kind of prayer you whisper with sugar. "Mom," she said, drawing the word out like a sigh. "You're early." "I wanted to avoid traffic," I answered, kindly placing the cake where the light hit it. The frosting looked like dusk on a river. "And I wanted to see your face when—" She was already looking past me. Ethan hovered in the doorway, one hand stuffed into his pocket, the other flattening an invisible wrinkle in his shirt. The twins flashed by like sparrows, a blur of sneakers and giggles, and then the hallway swallowed them. Somewhere, a music playlist turned itself down as if the house knew how to lower its voice when I arrived. I opened the cake box. The sweet smell rose and then thinned inside the silence. "Chocolate with strawberries," I said, smiling too brightly, hoping the memory might do the work my words couldn't. "Just like when you were little." She met my eyes, and there it was, the calm impatience I'd tried for years to explain away as busyness. "We need to talk," she said, glancing at Ethan. He vanished deeper into the house. She pulled a chair out for me without touching it herself, then kept standing, arms crossed, hip against the counter like I was an appointment she intended to stay short. "Of course," I said, smoothing the ribbon on the cake box that didn't need smoothing. "Do you want to cut it before the guests?" "Boundaries," she said, the word clipped. "I need space. You're here too much. The drop-ins, the calls. It's suffocating." My mouth went dry the way it does before a nurse draws blood. I had spent a lifetime learning to read pain, to speak softly to terrified people, to hold still while others trembled. I tried that now. "I only want to help." "That's the problem," she said, exhaling a laugh that wasn't a laugh. "Your help is control. It always has been." In the dining room, a place setting was missing a chair. I stared at the emptiness without meaning to. It made me think of all the dinners I'd sat through next to an empty space, saving a seat for a daughter who texted she was running late. Always running late, but whose emergencies were never mine to understand, only to fund. On the sideboard, a family photo leaned behind a vase of lilies, the glass faintly dusty, as if the past had stopped asking to be polished. "Melissa," I said, my voice small and even, "this is your day." I brought the cake. "I'll say hello and then—" She shook her head. "You never just say hello and leave. You stay, you watch. You make me feel like I'm failing some test you wrote." "I don't have a test." I spread my hands, palms up. The bracelet glinted. "I have a daughter." Her chin tipped, a precise little gesture I remembered from toddlerhood, the stubborn angle now armored in adult certainty. "I've been thinking about what I want this year," she said, "about the perfect present." "I'll get it," I replied too quickly, my old reflex speaking first. "If it's within my means, I'll—" "It is," she said. "The one gift I want is for you to leave me alone." She let the words sit between us, then added, softer and worse, "for good." Something about the air changed then. The kitchen light seemed too white. In the living room a timer beeped. No one moved to silence it. Ethan reappeared with 2 champagne flutes, set them down, and disappeared again like a stagehand who knows the show isn't for him. I looked at the cake and the carefully arranged strawberries, because love sometimes needs arranging, and I felt a tremor start in my fingers. The candles rattled in their box. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, because it was the language I used when families at the hospital needed something I couldn't give them, because a script can keep you from collapsing. "Ill? You don't hear me." She stepped closer, her incredible floral perfume I couldn't place. "Listen, the only gift I want is for you to die." Some sentences ripped the film from the projector and scorched the image off the wall. I heard the words, I listened to my breath answer them with a sound I'd never made. The room pulled itself far away and snapped back so close that I could count the pores on her nose. My hand closed over the cake box to steady myself, and a candle, thin and pale as a bone, slid under the frosting and left a small wound behind. I wanted to ask if she meant it, but we both knew she did. I tried to remind her of a prom dress shipped overnight, a bill paid in a winter when the heat would have been shut off, a set of braces fitted to a mouth that laughed like bells, a down payment on a house with this very kitchen, this very view. I wanted to say her name the way I used to find her in grocery aisles. God, I tried to return 1 hour and bring a different cake, and a different mother who knew how to walk away sooner. Instead, I closed the cake box. I slid the ribbon back into a bow. I reached for the serving knife and placed it neatly beside the plates, because order is its own prayer in the face of chaos. Ethan reappeared and said something about guests arriving. The twins yelled from upstairs. Melissa lifted her phone and started texting, already moving on to the part where the party would begin again after the mess was cleared. I took my purse from the chair and slipped the strap over my shoulder. The bracelet caught the light. In the reflection of the microwave door, I looked like a woman in a photograph taped to a wall, present but not included. I felt a calmness that frightened me by how complete it was. It washed through me, rinsed the hurt down to a quiet stone I could carry. At the threshold, I paused. No one followed. The hallway smelled of lilies, new paint, and something else I couldn't name. A trace of life that did not include me. I put my hand on the door, thinking of empty chairs and unopened mail and the little girl who used to blow out candles, clap her hands, and shout for cake. Evelyn leaves the house whispering, "Happy birthday, Melissa," knowing something inside her has died forever. I sat on my old sofa, surrounded by boxes of receipts, proof of every sacrifice I had ever made for my daughter, and began to realize the price of 45 years of love. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Evening light came through the blinds in narrow stripes, falling across stacks of envelopes and folders I had pulled from the hall closet. I had lived in this 2-bedroom place in Dallas for 15 years, long enough that the carpet carried the shape of my steps. I laid out everything I had saved on the coffee table. Bills paid, checks written, prom dresses ordered, tuition balances cleared. It looked like the paper trail of a woman who believed love could be measured in what she gave away. The first envelope I opened held a receipt for antibiotics, dated when Melissa was 3. Pneumonia had come in the middle of winter, and I had worked double shifts at the hospital just to afford the $1,200, 0 cents medication. My mother's wedding ring had been pawned that month. I remembered Melissa's tiny chest rising and falling, each breath a sound of hope, and how she clutched the stuffed rabbit I'd bought. I touched the receipt, like it was a photograph. Another folder held the tuition bills from college. She changed majors 3 times, and I never once told her no. $42,000. I had taken a second mortgage, eating boxed macaroni so she could study art, business, and psychology. Each semester, she'd call in tears, and I would whisper over the phone, "It's okay, honey." Education is the best investment. I used to believe that. A faded photograph slipped from between the bills. Melissa at prom, in the pink gown that had cost me 4 months of weekend overtime. $800 for satin and sequins made her eyes sparkle under the gymnasium lights. I could almost hear her voice from that night. "You're the best mom in the world." I folded the picture back into the bill, because even memory can sting like debt. The wedding folder was following. $35,000 for a ballroom that smelled of roses and champagne. I had signed every check with pride, watching her dance under chandeliers, believing I had secured her happiness. I remembered Ethan's hand on my shoulder that night, thanking me. The words must have been lighter than I thought, because they didn't stay long. Then came the down payment. The house where she had told me she wished me dead. $150,000 from my retirement savings. My pen strokes from that contract looked confident, but I remembered my hand trembling. I had told myself it was worth it to see her secure, to give her a start I had never had, And finally, the smaller but sharper expenses, $16,000 to cover their mortgage when Ethan lost his job, $4,000 for the twins' braces, at least $10,000 in holiday gifts over the years. I stacked each paper on the other until the tower leaned, heavy with my naivety. When I added it all together, the calculator blinked the number back at me. $460,000, nearly $500,000. If I had invested it, the interest would have turned into more than $600,000, enough to live in comfort, to travel, to rest. Instead, I had a chipped mug of coffee going cold and a sofa sagging beneath me. A knock came at the door. I wiped my eyes quickly and opened it to see Dolores, my neighbor. She carried 2 mugs, the smell of chamomile rising like mercy. She had lived across the hall for 10 years, a widow like me, and we shared walls, grocery lists, and sometimes silence when neither of us had the strength for words. "You look like you're wrestling with ghosts," she said gently, setting the mugs on the table. Her eyes fell on the mountain of papers. My goodness, I told her everything. The party, the cake, the words. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I described the receipts, the numbers, the years spent giving, and the daughter who looked at me like I was a weight chained to her ankles. Dolores listened, her hand resting lightly on mine. When I finished, she didn't offer cliches or easy forgiveness. She just nodded slowly, as if naming the truth with her silence. "I always knew you were generous," she said finally. "But this is devotion turned into chains." Her words pierced me. Devotion turned into chains. I thought of my bracelet again, the one from my late husband. Silver, simple, unbroken. I had worn it for decades, the only jewelry I never took off. Looking at the receipts, I felt like I had traded every other piece of myself for her comfort. I stacked the papers neatly back into their boxes, but didn't feel pride in their weight this time. I felt betrayal, sharp and cold. I had built my daughter's life with the marrow of my own, and she had thrown it back at me with one sentence: "The only gift I want is for you to die." Dolores refilled my cup. "What will you do?" she asked. I stared at the blinking number on the calculator. 460,000. It looked like a gravestone etched with all the parts of me I had buried. "She wants me gone," I whispered, steady for the first time all night. "Then gone I shall be, but not how she expects." The next morning, I walked into the bank with steady hands, ready to close the account that had tied me to my daughter for far too long. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer ink. Sunlight cut through tall windows, falling across neat chairs where strangers waited with checks and questions. I wore my best navy dress, which I usually save for Sunday service. A small armor, I told myself, for the war I was quietly declaring. My purse held a folder of documents, and my fingers rested on the strap as if the leather could anchor me to my decision. The teller recognized me. Dallas is large, but a neighborhood bank becomes its own little town. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, smiling warmly. "Back again?" I nodded, my smile calm. "I need to speak with a manager." He led me to an office where Greg Lawson, a man with gray temples and kind eyes, stood up to greet me. He had helped Melissa and me set up the joint account years ago, when we thought emergencies meant broken water heaters or unexpected dental bills, not broken hearts. "What can I do for you today?" he asked, settling into his chair. "It has a balance of about 20,000. "Yes," I said. "I want it transferred to my personal account." He hesitated, perhaps expecting guilt to crawl across my face. But all I felt was relief, like loosening a belt that had been strangling me for years. He tapped the keyboard, printed the forms, and slid them across. I signed with steady strokes, each loop of my signature cutting another cord of dependence. The metallic thud sounded like a gavel when he stamped the final page. Case closed. Walking out into the late morning sun, I breathed deeper than I had in months. $20,000 were reclaimed, not stolen or borrowed, but returned to me. My daughter would never again dip her hand into that well. It was the first step of disappearing, not into death as she wished, but into freedom. My next stop was the mortgage office. The receptionist pointed me to a small room lined with filing cabinets. Miss Williams, the loan officer, opened a thick folder with my name on it. You co-signed this loan for your daughter and her husband, she explained, sliding the contract forward. You're responsible if they default, but you also have rights. I traced the ink with my finger. I remembered Melissa's tears the day she asked me to sign, the way Ethan promised they'd never miss a payment. I had believed them. I had always thought, now the truth was inked here in black and white. They had failed, and my name gave me power I had never considered. What would it take to reclaim the property if I needed to? I asked. She looked at me closely, as if measuring whether I understood the question's weight. Evidence of instability, she answered. Missed payments, risk of default. You covered 8 months already last year. That would qualify. I folded the copy into my folder. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Not just for the paper, but for the doorway she had pointed out, which led back to my dignity. By the afternoon, I was sitting in Charles Whitman's office. His shelves were lined with law books, his desk scarred from years of elbows and arguments. He had been a friend of my late husband, the kind of man who still opened doors for widows and remembered birthdays. He leaned forward, listening as I told him everything. I didn't spare the details, the birthday party, the words, the decades of sacrifice. When I finished, his jaw was tight. Julian would never have let this stand, he said softly, using my husband's name, and neither should you. What do you want to do? I want to change everything, I replied. My will, my insurance. I want every document that names Melissa as a beneficiary removed. My grandchildren, yes, but not until they're grown. The rest should go to charity. She will not profit from my death. He nodded slowly, then began drafting. The scratch of his pen was a drumbeat in the quiet room. For 2 hours, we reviewed every policy and every account. My savings, life insurance, and even my modest apartment, all reassigned and protected. When we finished, Melissa had been erased from my financial map, a ghost with no claim. Are you sure? Charles asked one last time. This is permanent. I am, I said. She asked for my death. When it comes, she'll get nothing but silence. We stood together as he gathered the papers. You're stronger than you think, he said. I smiled faintly. No, I corrected. I'm finally just tired of being weak. Back in my apartment, I placed the folder on the table beside my silver bracelet that evening. The sun had dipped low, and the blinds painted stripes across the wall. I poured a glass of red wine, the first in years. It tasted like defiance and fruit, like something alive. I raised it toward the empty chair across from me, the place I used to save for Melissa when she promised to visit and never did. This is only the beginning, I whispered, and drank. At 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, my grief hardened into determination. If my daughter wanted me gone, then gone I would be. The apartment was still, only the refrigerator cycling on and off like a metronome. Shadows stretched long across the carpet, and the boxes of receipts from the night before sat closed in the corner like graves. I lay flat on my back, eyes burning in the dark until the ache inside me shifted into something steadier. The words Melissa had spoken had burned away the last of my illusions. I no longer hoped for her apology, warmth, or respect. All that remained was the decision to grant her wish, but on my terms. By dawn, I was moving through my home like a woman packing away a life. I set out 2 suitcases, one for clothing, another for documents and keepsakes. I rolled sweaters, folded blouses, and slid my silver bracelet into a padded pouch. I spread my passport, bank forms, and the freshly signed will Charles had prepared on the kitchen table. The table where I once laid out holiday dinners had become a war room. Dolores knocked at 7, carrying a thermos of coffee and the calm authority of a friend who knew I needed her. She sat across from me, listening as I explained what I intended: a staged disappearance, a vanishing act to show Melissa what it truly meant to live without me. Her eyes widened when I detailed the steps: closing accounts, changing legal papers, buying a one-way ticket. But when I mentioned the letter, her gaze sharpened with understanding. You want her to feel the weight of it, she said quietly. Yes, I admitted. Not just the money, the truth, every sacrifice, every receipt. I want her to see it all at once. That afternoon, I began the letter. 25 pages. My handwriting, careful but firm, marched across the lines. I wrote about the pneumonia, the prom dress, the wedding, and the house. I wrote of sleepless nights, empty chairs, and meals eaten alone while she celebrated elsewhere. I included copies of receipts, dates, and even bank statements. It was not spite. It was testimony. Finally, I stapled copies of the legal documents, my revised will, the notice of the joint account closure, and the mortgage contract outlining my rights. Together, they made a dossier of my absence. I read the first draft aloud, the words echoing in the small apartment. It sounded less like a mother's letter and more like a verdict. I rewrote it twice, softening some phrases, sharpening others. By evening, the letter sat neatly in an envelope with Melissa's name written in steady script. I left another copy sealed for Charles and a third for the pastor at our old church. The truth would already be out if Melissa tried to twist the story. Dolores came back the next morning. I pressed a spare key into her hand. "Wednesday," I instructed. "Go into my apartment. Say you grew worried when I didn't answer. Leave the letter where she will find it. Act shaken but firm." She chuckled softly, patting her chest. "I taught drama for 30 years, Evelyn. I can cry on cue." We both laughed, though the sound carried a sadness beneath it. She promised to tell Melissa the truth in the only way she might finally hear it. When Dolores left, I stood in the doorway watching her cross the hall, thinking how some bonds are more potent than blood. That evening I called the travel agency. A young man with a German accent confirmed my reservation. A Tuesday morning flight to Zurich, furnished apartment arranged, and a financial advisor appointment. I thanked him, my voice steady though my hands trembled as I hung up the phone. Switzerland is half a world away, and a blank page is waiting. I returned to my bedroom and surveyed the suitcases. One held dresses, shoes, and the coat I had bought on clearance years ago, never worn. The other held my documents, the bracelet, a faded photo of my husband, and the chipped mug that had survived every move. These were the things that told my story, not Melissa's version. The night before departure, I barely slept. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the worn arm of the sofa, the curtains yellowed with age. It was not nostalgia that slowed me, it was recognition. This apartment had been my refuge, my cocoon, where I had counted pennies for Melissa's tuition and prayed for her safety. Now it would become a stage set for my absence. At 5 the next morning, Dolores arrived with fresh coffee and a steady smile. She carried my suitcases to the door. Together, we rehearsed the plan one final time. She would wait 2 days, then call Melissa with a voice full of dread. "I haven't seen your mother. Her apartment is empty. I found this letter." She would deliver the envelope with trembling hands, the performance of a lifetime, she promised. When the cab pulled outside, its headlights brushed across the brick walls like a benediction. I locked the apartment door, slipped the keys into Dolores's hand, and drew a breath that felt heavy and freeing. The driver asked, "Where to, ma'am?" His accent was Texan, round and familiar. I glanced at Dolores, who raised her coffee cup in salute. I pressed the suitcase handle into my palm and answered with a clarity that startled even me. "To the airport." By the time I was sipping coffee by Lake Zurich, my phone was buzzing with desperate calls from the very daughter who told me to disappear. The lake was silver in the morning light, smooth as glass, except for a few swans gliding across the surface. I sat at a cafe table with a porcelain cups through my hands, the steam rising like an offering. Around me, conversations flowed in German, a language I couldn't yet understand, but the tone was softer than what I had left behind. My coat still smelled of lavender sachets from home, a reminder that you carry fragments of where you've been, even in exile. The phone on the table buzzed again. 32 missed calls. Melissa's name filled the screen, bold and insistent. I let it ring until it stopped. It rang again, her persistence as relentless as a dripping faucet. Finally, I answered. Her voice came sharp and frantic. "Mom? Where are you? What is going on? Dolores gave me your letter. You can't just vanish like this." I sipped the coffee before replying. "I thought it was what you wanted. That was..." She faltered, her breath hitching. "I didn't mean it like that. I was angry. Please, just come home. We need you." Her voice broke on the word need. Once, that word had been a summons I answered without hesitation. Sitting by a lake, an ocean away, I heard the hollow space inside it. I ended the call without saying goodbye. She claims you're making unsafe financial decisions and living in precarious conditions abroad. I pressed my palm against my chest, steadying my breath. That is a lie. I am here by choice. I live in a furnished apartment, have ample savings, and am healthy. I understand, Sarah said gently, but we need to verify. We can arrange a medical and psychological evaluation through the American consulate in Zurich. Set it up, I replied firmly. I will prove what she refuses to see. 2 days later, I sat in a sterile room at the consulate. White walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant. Dr. Helen Strauss, an American physician with streaks of silver in her hair, greeted me with a firm handshake. For 3 hours she asked questions, ran tests, and evaluated memory and judgment. I recited lists, solved puzzles, and described my plans. She listened carefully, pen scratching across her notes. When we finished, she folded her hands. Mrs. Carter, you are in excellent mental health. The decisions you've made are thoughtful and deliberate. Your daughter's allegations have no basis. She paused, her gaze steady. It appears she is trying to manipulate the system to regain financial control. Her words settled over me like a vindication I hadn't dared hope for. The report would go to social services, officially documenting Melissa's lie. For once, the paper trail was hers, not mine. Back in my apartment, I opened the balcony doors to hear church bells ringing across the city. I poured myself a white wine and let the cool air wash through. My phone lay silent on the counter. When it finally buzzed, it was Melissa again. Against my better judgment, I answered. You can't do this to me, she cried. They're saying the bank is reviewing our mortgage. Ethan lost his job again. We could lose the house. Please, Mom, we need you. The word house caught in her throat like a splinter. Not family, not love. House, mortgage, money. My silence stretched between us. Do you need me? I asked slowly. Or do you need my money? There was no answer. Only her breathing was jagged, like a child caught in a lie. I ended the call and blocked her number. For the first time in decades, I chose peace over pleading. That night, I treated myself to dinner by the lake, a plate of salmon with dill, a glass of crisp Riesling. The candle on my table flickered, and I watched its reflection tremble across the water. For years, I had denied myself such luxuries, always saving, always giving. Now, each bite tasted like reclamation. The next morning, Sarah Williams called again. The report is complete, she said. Your evaluation confirms full competency. The case is closed. And Mrs. Carter said, your daughter's false complaint is on record. Thank you, I whispered, my throat tightening. For once, the system had seen me not as an aging burden, but a capable woman reclaiming her life. I walked to the park afterward. Children laughed on the swings, their voices high and clear. I thought of the twins and wondered what Melissa had told them. Perhaps she claimed I was ill, unavailable, too fragile to visit. But the truth was stronger than her stories, stamped and sealed by the consulate. As the sun dipped low, the lake turned gold. I breathed deeply, inhaling the scent of pine carried on the wind. My phone remained dark, silent at last. I leaned against the railing, heart steady, mind clear. This time, silence is my reply. News reached me that my daughter had lost the house. Foreclosure was the justice I never had to lift a finger to deliver. I was sitting on the balcony of my Zurich apartment when the call came. The Alps stood in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, and the evening light washed the lake in shades of rose and violet. Charles Whitman's voice, steady and measured, carried across the ocean as if he were sitting beside me again. The foreclosure went through last week, he said. The bank has already processed the sale. Because you were the co-signer, you can recover your original down payment, $150,000 plus interest. After deductions, it comes to $185,000. The transfer will be complete within days. I closed my eyes, letting the numbers settle in. Not greed, not triumph, just balance at last. The money I had once surrendered in the name of love was returning to me like a prodigal child. Thank you, Charles, I whispered. He cleared his throat. "Evelyn, there's more. Melissa's reputation has taken a beating. The neighbors, the church group, and even Ethan's family know about the foreclosure." Word spread fast. I pictured the house in Plano, the mailbox stuffed with warnings. In my mind, I saw neighbors whispering as Melissa carried boxes to a borrowed truck. She had always craved appearances, the perfect dress, house, and party. Now her downfall was public, captured in murmurs and sidelong glances, maybe even in the glow of a neighbor's phone camera. That night, Dolores called from Dallas. Her voice was warm but tinged with disbelief. "You should have seen her, Evelyn. She came to me in tears, asking if I had a way to reach you. She begged me to tell you she was sorry and finally understood." "And what did you say?" I asked. "I told her some wounds can't be undone. That some words, once spoken, carve themselves in stone." Dolores's pause carried more weight than words. She looked devastated, but I think she was grieving the money more than the mother. I leaned back in my chair, the mountain air cool against my skin. Melissa had wished me gone, and now she was tasting the sharp edge of what she thought she wanted. The following week, the transfer cleared. I opened my bank statement and stared at the balance. My savings, the interest, the recovered funds. I now held over $600,000. At 72, I was richer than ever, not just in money, but in freedom. I decided to celebrate. I ordered French champagne at my favorite lakeside restaurant and toasted the woman I had become. Around me, couples laughed, tourists took photos, and waiters carried trays heavy with fondue pots. I sat alone and felt no loneliness. The glass in my hand sparkled with bubbles, each one a reminder that I had chosen myself and survived. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but familiar. I opened it carefully, my heart tightening. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, decorated with crayon drawings of mountains and a woman with silver hair. The twins had written, "Dear Grandma, Dad told us the truth. Mom said bad things and you left. We understand. We miss you. We are proud of you for being brave. Someday we want to visit you. We love you." Tears blurred the words. I pressed the pages to my chest, my shoulders shaking. Not with grief, but with a release I hadn't felt in years. They knew. They saw me. Love, though wounded, had not died. That evening I sat at my desk and began another letter to them. I wrote that I loved them deeply, that they should learn from this. Words have the power to build or to destroy, and respect is the proper foundation of family. I promised my door would always be open when they were older and free to choose. Months passed. Zurich became home. I enrolled in German classes, joined a hiking group, and took watercolor lessons on Tuesdays. My calendar is filled with activities of my choosing. No emergencies, no demands, no calls at midnight. My book, When Love Hurts, took shape on the page. When it was published, the response astonished me. Women across Europe and America wrote to me, thanking me for giving them the courage to break free from children who treated them like burdens or banks. One evening I received an email from a young woman in Spain. "I thought I was selfish for telling my son no. After reading your book, I realized I was saving my own life. Thank you." Another from Mexico read, "You showed me that true love never demands self-destruction. I saved every letter, every message, each one a stitch in the new quilt of my life. And still, every once in a while, I thought of Melissa." I wondered if she stood in line at a grocery store and heard someone whisper her name. I asked if she saw the foreclosure notice printed in the local paper. I wondered if shame, more than sorrow, was her companion now. But I did not wish her harm. My justice had already arrived. Not through revenge, but truth revealed. She had lost not only money and a house, but also the mother who once gave her everything. As autumn painted the Alps gold, I carried the twins' letter to the balcony. I reread it, and the crayon colors were bright in the fading light. Then I whispered to the mountains, to the swans, to the life I had reclaimed. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to disappear so you can finally be found. Ultimately, my story is not about money, houses, or even the cruel words spoken on a birthday. It is about the invisible wounds when family becomes a place of betrayal instead of safety. I gave everything I had to my daughter, believing that love meant sacrifice without limits. But sacrifice without respect turns into slavery. I learned that devotion can be twisted into chains when gratitude disappears. I carried the weight of years, thinking love was measured by dollars and sleepless nights. But the accurate measure of love is mutual care, not endless giving. When Melissa told me that the greatest gift would be my death, a part of me did die that day. It was the part of me that accepted disrespect as usual. It was the part of me that confused control with love and silence with peace. Out of that death, a new life began, one where my worth was not negotiable. I discovered that sometimes the most radical act of love is to love yourself enough to walk away. I found freedom not by punishing her, but by refusing to remain her safety net. Justice came quietly, through documents, foreclosures, and the silence of a blocked number. And healing came loudly, through the voices of my grandchildren who said they were proud of me. I realized that dignity is more valuable than inheritance, and peace more precious than approval. Every receipt I once saved became proof not of loss, but of my capacity to give. Those receipts are history, while my present is filled with choice and clarity. I learned that drawing boundaries is never too late, even at 72, and it is never too late to reclaim a life that once felt stolen. Sometimes your children will not give you the love you deserve, but that does not mean you are unworthy of love. You must seek it elsewhere, in friends, communities, and yourself. Family is sacred, but not every bond is holy. Respect must be mutual, or it becomes exploitation. I understand now that silence can be the strongest reply, and absence the sharpest teacher. Because absence is not empty, it is a space where healing grows. Melissa lost a house, but I gained a home in my heart. She lost control over me, but I gained control of my future, and I would choose this path again, even with all the pain that carried me here. I want you to remember this. No betrayal, no matter how deep, can erase your worth. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are protection. Dignity is not pride, it is survival. And forgiveness does not always mean reunion. Sometimes it means releasing yourself from the victim role. My journey reminds you that you can step away from toxic ties. You can keep your heart safe, even from those you once cradled in your arms. And you are allowed to live a new life, full of peace, freedom, and joy. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to disappear so you can finally be found. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your story in the comments below. I would love to know. If you love this story, type number 1 and subscribe to Auntie Tales to hear the next one.